10. German Chainsaw Massacre. In a small German town, an 18-year-old kid almost had his hand chopped off during a prank involving a chainsaw. The victim of this horrible prank was celebrating Christmas holiday with friends in the small town of Vickede. The teen had fallen asleep on the sofa very early in the morning, and one of his friends decided to play a joke on him. He brought a chainsaw inside the house, thinking it would be hilarious if he woke his friend up by switching on the chainsaw and waving it around in his face. Naturally, the prank did not work as planned. When the prankster turned on the chainsaw, the victim jerked upright, wide awake, and then leaped into the air, acting on instinct. He tried to push the chainsaw away from him, since he was still dazed and didn't understand what was happening. The chainsaw ripped into his flesh and almost cut his arm off. The poor guy had to be rushed to the hospital, while the other friends who were present had to be treated for shock. They were left stunned by all the blood that was flung around by the spinning chainsaw. According to a spokesman with the police, the prankster claimed he thought the chain brake was active, which would have prevented the chain from spinning. But of course, that wasn't the case. Luckily for the victim, he survived with only minor injuries. 9. April Fool's Day. An April Fool's Day prank gone wrong recently landed 58-year-old Arnthea Willis behind bars. The bizarre prank unfolded in Wichita, Kansas, when Arnthea phoned a relative and screamed that she had been shot before abruptly hanging up. That relative just so happened to be her daughter. As you can imagine, the daughter was obviously very panicked. Her mother literally phoned, said she had been shot, and then hung up. Naturally, the daughter called the police. The police rushed to Arnthea's house, where they blocked off all the surrounding streets, treating it as an active shooter situation. Nobody would answer Arnthea's door, so they eventually kicked it down and stormed inside. It was about as dramatic as it gets. Once inside the house, the police were a little upset to see that nobody was home. And seeing as it was April 1st, people were starting to get suspicious. The officers with the Derby Police Department quickly tracked down the prankster at her place of work, where she had made the desperate prank call to her daughter earlier. The cops were so angry that the woman had wasted their time on a silly prank that they took her into custody immediately and locked her up in jail. She is now facing charges of unlawfully requesting emergency service assistance. It's basically the same charge you would get for prank calling 911. 8. Michael Myers on the beach. In one of the most bizarre cases of a prank gone wrong, Michael Myers was arrested for hanging out on the beach in the middle of a storm in Texas. The early Halloween prank was performed just hours before a hurricane made landfall. A man dressed as the horror killer Michael Myers strolled down Galveston Beach, walking right in front of people and scaring the pants off them. After all, the last thing you expect to see while visiting the beach before a literal hurricane is a serial killer from the movies. But perhaps what makes the prank most bizarre of all is that somebody actually called the police. Officers received a call that a man in a mask was wandering down the beach carrying a knife covered in blood. Whoever called the cops had obviously never seen the Halloween movies. The cops treated this guy like he was an actual serial killer. They attacked him on the beach, threw him to the ground, kicked away his knife, and handcuffed him. Even though he tried to explain that he was dressed up like a character from a movie, the cops didn't care. They actually brought him in and cited him for disorderly conduct. All he had been doing was walking down the beach. He just so happened to be wearing his Halloween costume a little early. He was released from the police station pretty quickly, considering the prankster is a lawyer in real life. His name is Mark Metzger, and according to him, his reason for the prank was to share a bit of positivity in the gloom of the oncoming hurricane. Though afterward, he admitted that maybe not everyone found his prank funny. 7. Throwing slushies. A pair of teens found themselves locked up over a YouTube prank gone wrong. This one involving dangerous slushies. According to the official affidavit, the teens were arrested for throwing slushies at complete strangers to record their reactions. Rude. One of the kids even trespassed onto somebody's lawn and then threw a Polar Pop slushie from Circle K at the person standing in the driveway. The slushie was thrown so hard that it burst on their back and showered their house with sticky slush. The pranksters were identified as Kezenia Leonard Antonio McKay and Rafael Mercado. After they got busted, they told the police it was just a stunt for YouTube and that they were hoping to make a few bucks by monetizing the video. Plus, McKay admitted that he had tried the prank days before, getting the inspiration after he threw the drink at a stranger. The kids were arrested on charges of battery, conspiracy to commit a crime, and trespassing. 6. Contaminating the food. A delivery driver for DoorDash was recently arrested after a video was uploaded to social media in which he was seen tampering with food ordered by an officer with the NYPD. His name is Lance Lane, and he's been charged with assault on a police officer, even though he never actually touched any police officer. In the video, Lance can clearly be seen contaminating the cop's meal by sticking his fingers into the Chipotle container. That's definitely weird, but Lance took it a step too far when he left a note with the food that said, "Hope that tastes good," suggesting the food had been tampered with. When the cop got his food, he opened up the container and saw the note. The cop was so mad and so worried about what had happened to the food that he simply threw it in the garbage. And Lance might have gotten away with his ridiculous prank if he hadn't posted a video of himself doing it and then uploaded it to Facebook. The police then made a manhunt out of the situation, tracking Lance down and dragging him out of his house in handcuffs. Do you think Lance went too far in pranking the New York cop? Let us know your opinion in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 5. Death to the cyclists. 6 bicyclists in Houston have been injured after a failed prank gone horribly wrong. 2 of the bicyclists had to be airlifted to hospital. 2 others also had to go to the hospital in ambulances, and the other 2 walked away with only minor injuries. The prank involved a 16-year-old kid behind the wheel of a pickup truck. The kid, when he spotted the cyclist, thought it would be funny to slam on the gas and shoot exhaust fumes at them as he drove by. He accelerated way too quickly, and by the time he caught up to the cyclist, he wasn't able to brake in time. Instead of shooting diesel smoke in their faces, he hit their faces with his truck. He ran all 6 cyclists over in one fell swoop. Pranks don't get much worse than this. Blowing smoke at people and actually running them over with your truck are incredibly different things. According to Fox News, the young driver has been arrested, but his name has not been released for privacy reasons, as he's still a juvenile. All 6 bicyclists are expected to make full recoveries, though who knows if they'll ever have the courage to get back on their bicycles and drive down the road again. These guys were on their way to the Ironman Texas competition, an event none of them were able to attend because they were horribly mangled by the Texan in the pickup truck. 4. Kids misbehaving. Speaking of juveniles, a couple of very young kids have been arrested after a bizarre bomb threat against an elementary school. It happened on a Monday morning when the youngsters phoned the school and told them that SpongeBob SquarePants was going to throw a bag full of hand grenades through one of their windows. The juveniles were caught in less than an hour because the school knew exactly who they were thanks to their caller ID system. The pranksters didn't even have the foresight to block their number. School employees called the cops. They told them who the pranksters were, and the cops went to the kids' houses and arrested each of them one at a time. In this case, the kids responsible for the prank were so young that they were released into the custody of their parents. It's not clear what kind of charges they'll be facing, but hopefully they've learned their lesson. Clearly, they had been watching too much SpongeBob and too many true crime stories. Not a great combination for kids. 3. Kidnapping gone wrong. Yet another fatality has taken place for the sake of creating a popular TikTok video. This time, the victim was a 20-year-old woman from Mexico. She was accidentally killed as she and some friends tried to film a fake kidnapping video, which they were planning to upload online. Her name was Areline Martinez, and she died instantly from a bullet penetrating her skull. Here's what the prank was supposed to look like. Martinez and another person were blindfolded and tied up. Then the people who were the fake kidnappers were supposed to make some demands. It was your standard fake kidnapping video. But one of their props happened to be a real gun. Nobody knows why they used a real gun, if they simply couldn't find a fake one, or if they wanted it for authenticity. But whatever the case, when one of the fake kidnappers pressed the gun against Martinez's head, he pulled the trigger. He must not have known that the gun was loaded, because when he pulled the trigger, he blew Martinez's brains all over the ground. Sadly, Martinez was a mother to a 1-year-old baby. That poor child will never know who his mother was, all because she wanted to get popular on the internet. 2 of the men who were involved in the shooting fled the scene after and have still not been found by the police. In fact, the Mexican police have not made any arrest in the case, even though it happened nearly a year ago. They say the investigation is still ongoing. 2. Birthday murder. In the worst birthday prank ever, a man in Florida shot and killed his son-in-law. According to Santa Rosa Sheriff Bob Johnson, it was Richard Dennis who heard a bang at his front door at around 9:30 at night. It was one of his relatives, a local man he was having a dispute with. The two got into an argument and the relative ran away. 2 hours later, there was another bang at the door. This time, someone was really thumping on it, as if they wanted to break the thing down. Dennis assumed it was the same guy from earlier who he was quarreling with, maybe come back to finish him off. So he took his .380 caliber pistol, flung the door open, and walked out onto the porch. There was nobody on the porch. Dennis looked around, now a bit shaken because whoever banged on his door was clearly terrorizing him. And that was when somebody exploded from the bushes. Dennis wheeled around and pulled the trigger of his pistol. We need to back up a few hours at this point, to when Christopher Bergen got off a plane. Christopher flew all the way to America from Norway to surprise Dennis for his birthday. Dennis was Bergen's father-in-law. He thought it would be hilarious if he knocked on the door when he arrived at his house, then jumped out of the bushes growling like a bear. What Bergen didn't know was just how bad his timing would be. When he jumped out of the bushes growling, Dennis was so startled that he shot him in the face and killed him instantly. By the time deputies arrived on the scene, Bergen was long dead. Dennis had towels trying to stop the bleeding, but it was no good. It was all a horrible accident. It really makes you think twice about knocking on people's doors and then jumping out of the bushes. Sometimes surprises just don't work out. 1. Golfing in Alabama. A trio of golfers in Alabama had a horrible time when they were attacked in a prank gone wrong. These guys were playing a tournament at the Kraft Farms Golf Resort when several individuals dressed in full camouflage began terrorizing them from the woods. They were hiding behind the trees, blowing air horns whenever a player was about to hit the golf ball. Naturally, the golfers didn't think it was very funny. They quickly confronted the men in the bushes, which caused a brawl to break out. The pranksters significantly outnumbered the old fellas in their golfing khakis. They were younger, stronger, and quite a bit meaner. Instead of just leaving them alone once the jig was up, the pranksters stormed out of the forest like medieval troops and beat the old golfers with their fists. The three golfers were beaten so badly that one of them ended up with several broken teeth and had to be taken to the hospital. Another golfer suffered cuts to his head. As for the people who actually committed the assault, they were never captured. They ran out of the woods, got into their getaway vehicle, and were never seen again.
Number 10. Claudia Ochoa Felix. Claudia Ochoa Felix, one of the nastiest female assassins the world has ever seen, died from a drug overdose back in 2019. She went under a few different names and was known by the media under a few different aliases. She was called the Empress of Anthrax and even the Kim Kardashian of organized crime, and for good reason. Claudia allegedly ran the assassin unit for El Chapo. The attractive and voluptuous brunette worked as a model and was romantically connected to Jose Rodrigo Arechiga, better known as El Chino Anthrax, who headed the gang before he was arrested, according to reports. She was reported to have taken on the role of the Anthrax leader after Arechiga's arrest. This means she was thought to be the head of the notorious Mexican drug lord's Sinaloa cartel's unit for killing high-profile targets. Yet, despite being rumored as a skilled assassin, she was found lifeless in the home of her lover, in the city of Culiacan, dead from a drug overdose. She had allegedly gone out with a lover the night before to a nightclub, took way too much of whatever she was taking, and suffered a complete organ failure. When he woke up the next day, she was dead in bed beside him. And while we don't know exactly who Ochoa may have killed, we do know that she was supposedly the head of Los Anthrax. This was an armed enforcement division of the Sinaloa cartel. Any killings she may have done were done in secret, and so it could have been as few as 0 or as many as in the hundreds. There's just no possible way to know how many people she may or may not have assassinated. Number 9. Kim Hyun-hui. Kim Hyun-hui was the female assassin who participated in blowing up a passenger jet at the behest of North Korean leader Kim Jong-il, resulting in the deaths of 115 people. It happened on November 29, 1987. Kim was one of just 2 agents behind the bombing of the Korean Air Flight 858. It was on its way from Baghdad to the capital of Seoul. The Boeing 707 was brought down just off the coast of Myanmar, 2 weeks prior to the Summer Olympics being held in South Korea. All the passengers on board, every last crew member, most of whom were South Korean, were killed in the crash, and it was all under the order of Kim Jong-il. At the time, he was the son of the leader, Kim Il-sung. Kim's story is one of shock and surprise. She was selected at the young age of 18 to join the Secret Service in North Korea because of her ability to speak many different languages. She was given rigorous training and then handed her first assignment at the age of 25. She and another agent, Kim Seung-il, traveled to Austria disguised as a Japanese couple on their holiday. There, they picked up a bomb disguised as a Panasonic radio and then transported it to the Baghdad airport. While going through security, airport officials said that Kim couldn't take the radio on board because it looked dangerous. But when she turned the radio on and music came out, airport officials figured it was just an ordinary radio. But it wasn't. The bomb was planted in the overhead locker, and then Kim got off the plane as it made a stopover in Abu Dhabi. The bomb then detonated shortly after the plane took off, killing everyone on board. The 2 agents were caught in Bahrain trying to escape back to North Korea. But in this case, the assassin was actually given a pardon. In 1990, President Roh Tae-woo pardoned Kim because he felt that she was brainwashed into participating in the crime by North Korea. Nowadays, Kim is working for South Korea's National Intelligence Service against her homeland in the north. Number 8. Mistress Marcia. Mistress Marcia was the female assassin responsible for killing one of the worst emperors in Roman history. I'm talking about Emperor Commodus, a man who rose to the head of state by having his father poisoned. You might actually remember the name from Ridley Scott's legendary film Gladiator. In this rendition, Commodus was played by Joaquin Phoenix, but in real life, Commodus was much worse than the character in the movie. He became the Roman emperor in the year 180, following what is known as the period of the 5 good emperors. He did a major 180, becoming one of the worst emperors Rome has ever seen. He had an obsession with sports and with women. He had his wife, Crispina, his mistress named Marcia, and a harem of about 600 concubines. These concubines were equal parts young men and young boys. The Senate hated Commodus so badly that they continuously tried to have him killed. His sister even led a conspiracy to have him executed before she herself was executed at his orders. Plenty of assassins tried to kill him with daggers and poison, but he got away clean every time. That was until Mistress Marcia finally turned on him. She was sick of being the Emperor's toy and had actually uncovered a plot in which he was planning on killing everyone close to him, including her. So she did what none of the other assassins before her could do. She handed the Emperor a cup of poisoned wine, making him sick. While he was in the bathtub, weak and incapacitated, Marcia had a man named Narcissus come in and finish the job by strangling him. That's one way of leaving a disastrous relationship with a murderous emperor. Number 7. La Tosca. La Tosca has been called the deadliest female assassin in all of Mexico. She even confessed to murdering at least 20 different people. Her real name is Maria Jimenez, and she was arrested in the northern city of Monterrey for her participation in an assassination in the Los Zetas drug cartel. What makes this even more incredible is that she was only 26 years old at the time of her arrest, and already a hardened killer. According to local news reports, she was being paid only $1,700 a month to be on retainer as a contract killer. Maria worked alongside other assassins, though she was the only woman among them. When she was arrested, it was for gunning down a group of rival drug traffickers and executing a police officer. Still, her 20 assassinations are only a drop in the bucket when looking at the over 50,000 drug-related killings that have gone on in Mexico since December of 2006. Number 6. Shi Jiangyao. Almost 100 years ago, on October 14, 1936, a Chinese woman named Shi Jianqiao got away with murder. She also became one of the first famous female assassins in history. 13 months before she got away with the killing, she walked into a Buddhist prayer meeting in the city of Tianjin. She approached a man named Sun Chuanfang, who was leading the recitation. When he wasn't looking, she shot him 3 times in the back of the head, then put her gun on the ground and surrendered herself to the authorities. She admitted that she had planned the assassination with great detail and had even changed her name to Jian Qiao, which translates to English roughly as sword wielder. But why did she kill this man, and how did she get away with it? To understand the circumstances, it's important to know that this era of Chinese history was called the Warlord period. It was a time when Beijing had very little power, and most of the country was run by small warlords. It started after the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1911, and persisted until very recently. The man whom Shi Jianqiao assassinated was the warlord responsible for killing her father and then displaying his head on a pike outside the local railway station. She got away clean because of mitigating circumstances. A judge ruled because her father was wrongfully killed, her revenge was justified, and so her sentence was subject to leniency. In other words, a court literally let her go free on account of her killing Sun Chuanfang for revenge. Do you think we should implement these types of laws in today's society? Should a person get away with murder if it's to avenge a different murder? Let me know your thoughts on this complex issue in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. Melissa Calderon Ojeda. Melissa Calderon Ojeda, known in Mexico as La China, was a dangerous female assassin who got arrested after her boyfriend ratted her out to the authorities. She was at one point one of the most notorious assassins in all of Latin America. But when her boyfriend ran into some trouble with the Mexican government, he agreed to give up information about her so that he himself could get a reduced sentence. Who was Melissa Calderon Ojeda? Just the leader of a small gang, a kind of mini cartel with only around 300 followers. Yet despite their low numbers, they were responsible for an estimated 150 murders in the past decade. And Melissa very likely pulled the trigger on many of those killings. In fact, her boyfriend, probably ex-boyfriend by now, took the authorities to a mass grave where he claimed Melissa had been dumping her victims. He also claimed that she sometimes took the victims out of the grave and deposited them on the doorstep of one of the family members, usually to influence someone in authority or even intimidate a police officer. Have you heard of any cases like hers before today? Tell me in the comments. Number 4. Charlene Gallego. Charlene Gallego went on a murderous rampage that left 10 people dead in California. It went on for nearly 2 years, between 1978 and 1980. She wasn't committing the murders alone, but had an accomplice. It was her husband, Gerald Gallego. Together, they worked to lure youngsters into their vehicle with the promise of smoking marijuana together. And seeing as Charlene was an attractive young brunette, it worked pretty much every time. but she had no interest in partying with her victims, only with exploiting, torturing, and ultimately murdering them. She was an unquenchable serial killer, an insane assassin by every definition. Charlene and her husband only got captured once they got careless. The California killing spree ended with 9 women bludgeoned or shot to death, most of them teenagers, and one of them pregnant. Some were beaten to death with shovels, some with hammers. It was ultimately a frat boy who witnessed the Gallegos trying to force the students into the car that called the police. The pair tried to run away to Nebraska, but were quickly apprehended and brought to justice. Number 3. Charlotte Corday. Charlotte Corday assassinated French revolutionary leader Jean-Paul Marat on July 13, 1793. Jean-Paul was one of the main leaders of the French Revolution, stabbed to death in his bathtub by a royalist sympathizer and the world's first female assassin. While there were definitely female killers before this, none shot to fame quite like Charlotte Corday. Charlotte was the daughter of an impoverished aristocrat and viewed Jean-Paul as an enemy of France. Jean-Paul was a strong criticizer of those who were in power at the time. This was truly an era of revolution, with the king having been arrested in August of the year Jean-Paul was killed. He was actually elected as a deputy of Paris and championed the people as an opponent of the Republicans in power, who wanted a constitutional government and a war across the continent. But, like every political upheaval in history, there are people on both sides. Charlotte was on the other side. She hated Jean-Paul so bad that she hunted him to his home. She gained an audience with the man by pretending to have information that could help him bring down his opposition. But when she got to his home, she stabbed him several times in the chest while he was in the bath. He died almost immediately, and Charlotte was arrested by the police. As punishment for her crime, she was decapitated 4 days later on the guillotine. Number 2. Kionia Guseva. Kionia Guseva was an ordinary talented woman born in the year 1880 or 1881. In 1899, she moved to what is now known as the city of Volgograd in Russia. There, she became involved with a monk by the name of Iliodor and tried to assassinate Grigory Rasputin in 1914. Historical records don't tell us a lot about her life. We know that she was probably around the age of 33 when she tried to assassinate the legendary Rasputin. He was a Russian mystic who befriended the family of Nicholas II and ended up wielding a significant amount of influence in Imperial Russia. This was during the days of the last emperor. We also know that Kionia didn't have a nose, but we don't know why. It could have been a bad case of syphilis. The assassination attempt was carried out after Rasputin had finished eating and was on his way to reply to a telegram. Kionia attacked him in the street, stabbed him in the abdomen, and then chased him, screaming, "I've killed the Antichrist!" But her aim was off, and Rasputin didn't die. He smacked her in the face, she fell to the ground, and she was picked apart by the angry crowd. She was then found to be insane during court proceedings and placed in an asylum until 1917. When she was released, she went on to try and assassinate Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow in 1919. What happened to the insane assassin after that is unknown. Number 1. Sarah Jane Moore. Sarah Jane Moore is the woman who tried to assassinate President Ford back in September of 1975. She was from West Virginia, 45 years old, married 5 times, and arguably deranged. When President Ford walked out of the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, Sarah Jane Moore was waiting in the crowd on the other side of the street. She pulled out a gun, began to fire, but was quickly disarmed by a former Marine who happened to be standing near her. The bullet missed Ford by only a couple of feet, bouncing off a wall and injuring a cab driver. Later on, it was determined by FBI case agent Richard Vidamanti that if the sight of her .38 caliber gun had been faulty, she would have gotten a centered headshot that would have definitely killed the president. As it was, the faulty sight put a shot off by about 6 inches. Sarah pleaded guilty to the attempted assassination and was given life in prison. She was eventually paroled in 2007 after serving 32 years. In an interview in 2009, she blamed the times for what she had done. It was the Vietnam War. People wanted a revolution, and she felt that by shooting the president, she could have changed the country for the better. Number 10. Nudity gone wrong. A 16-year-old girl named Anel Bays was stabbed to death in her own home in Mexico. The killer was supposedly her best friend, a girl named Arandy Gutierrez. Gutierrez was arrested at the dead girl's funeral with police saying the murder was all because of a post on social media. First of all, the stabbing was horrific. Gutierrez stabbed her best friend 65 times. As if once or twice wasn't enough, she stabbed her enough to kill her 3 or 4 times over. Second of all, the stabbing was motivated after the 16-year-old posted nude photos of both of them on her Facebook account. Both girls lived in Western Mexico, but they got into a huge fight after the nude photos went live on Facebook. Gutierrez showed up at the victim's house under the pretense that she needed to use the toilet, but she went past the toilet, into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and began stabbing. She then fled the scene with her best friend dead in a pool of blood. She tried to cover up her tracks by grieving with friends and family at the dead girl's funeral just days later. When police checked their Twitter accounts, they discovered that Gutierrez had sent death threats to her best friend, saying that, in her head, she'd already killed her at least 3 times. Clearly, she was already plotting the murder. As for why the youngster posted naked pictures of both of them online, we don't really know what the motive was. It didn't seem to be malicious, but rather a poor decision on the young girl's part. Number 9. Caught by the belt. In Canada, a woman has gotten caught for a murder after the police discovered her picture with the murder weapon in a Facebook post. She literally posted a picture of herself with the very weapon she used to strangle her friend. 21-year-old Cheyenne Rose Antoine pleaded guilty to manslaughter in Saskatoon Provincial Court for the brutal slaying of Brittany Gargle, 18. Gargle's body had been discovered in landfill back in March of 2015. The weapon used to kill her was a blue woven belt with a big buckle. It was found on the road right beside her body. 6 hours before the young girl was strangled to death with that belt, Cheyenne posted a picture of herself wearing it online. After the killing, Cheyenne tried to shrug off suspicion by posting on the victim's wall, asking where she was and saying that she hoped Brittany had made it home safe. But the Canadian cops weren't so easily fooled. They found a selfie, linked the murder weapon directly to Cheyenne, and quickly made the arrest. It turned out the pair had gotten into an argument, which escalated into an alcohol-fueled murder. According to the Crown prosecutor in the case, Robin Ritter, Cheyenne poses a dangerous threat to the public and has some serious issues. Cheyenne can now work those issues out as she spends the majority of the rest of her life stuck in a prison cell. Number 8. Most Wanted fail. A suspect on the most wanted list for the Tulsa Police Department in Oklahoma got herself caught by commenting on the police department's Facebook page. It proved to be one of the dumbest moves ever. It all started when the Tulsa Police Department posted images of criminal Lorraine Graves on Facebook as part of their Most Wanted campaign. The police were looking for information as to her whereabouts because she was being charged as an accessory to murder. She was involved in a homicide in which a man named Eric Graves was shot and killed at a local apartment complex. Shortly after the post went up, Lorraine Graves commented on it using her very own Facebook account. She asked the police where the reward money at, as if she might be able to turn herself in and get paid for it. Maybe she did it as a joke, but it didn't turn out to be that funny in the end. She was arrested the next day because the fugitive warrant unit was able to track her location, thanks to the comment she made on their post. She has since been charged with accessory to murder, her bond set at $500,000. And no, she didn't get any kind of reward money. Can you imagine having the gall to post something like that while warrants are out for you? Guess she didn't know about how IP addresses work. Number 7. Too much marijuana. 2 people have been arrested in Massachusetts after a social media post led police straight to them. According to the New Bedford Police Department, they discovered a social media post showing huge amounts of marijuana and a firearm inside of a vehicle. They were able to see the post go up in real time, then track it to a housing development. There, the police officers found a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old sitting inside the very vehicle that had been in the social media post. Lo and behold, when the police conducted a search of the vehicle, they found 43 bags of marijuana. The marijuana was packaged in a manner consistent with what you would expect from street-level sales. In other words, these guys were gearing up to sell some serious pot. Perhaps the craziest part is that police found the weapon being carried by the juvenile. The 15-year-old had a loaded 9mm handgun on him. The post was a pretty bad decision for these young criminals. The juvenile was deemed dangerous by the police and taken to a juvenile detention center. The older boy was brought up on charges of possession to distribute marijuana. It didn't help that he already had 4 warrants out for his arrest, and was caught the week prior pointing a gun at someone. Yet, despite this guy clearly not being a very good member of society, a judge let him go with a bail of just $500. 17 open charges pending, and he was immediately let back on the street. Number 6. Selling the kids online. A mother in Oklahoma tried to sell a pair of children on Facebook for $4,000. If that doesn't make you sick to your stomach, just wait until you hear why she needed the money. According to Misty Van Horn, the 22-year-old child seller, she needed the cash to pay for her boyfriend's bail. Because her boyfriend was locked up and she wanted him to be free, she tried to sell her 2 babies through Facebook. One of them was 2 years old, the other only 10 months. Thankfully, an unidentified woman in Arkansas saw the social media post and decided to do something about it. She contacted the seller, who agreed she could take both her kids for $4,000. When the woman realized it was no joke, she contacted the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, who then notified the local police. The police tracked down Misty Van Horn, took her kids away, sent her to jail on a bond of $40,000, and brought her up on suspicion of trafficking children. Thankfully, the kids are young enough that they probably won't remember this terrible ordeal. They've also been put into state custody, where hopefully they will find foster or adoptive parents who will give them the love and care they need. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen someone try to sell on Facebook? Let me know all of your wildest stories in the comments. And don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. Twitter bomb threats. A Dutch girl just 14 years old learned the hard way how just not funny bomb threats are. We all know that we're not supposed to talk about bombs in the airport. That goes without saying. But as it turns out, you also shouldn't be making bomb threats on Twitter because the authorities take it extremely seriously. The girl tweeted directly to the official American Airlines Twitter account. She said that her name is Ibrahim, that she's from Afghanistan, that she's part of Al-Qaeda, and that on June 1st, she's going to do something really big. This was obviously a huge error on the part of the little girl. American Airlines tweeted her back, saying that they take threats very seriously. They explained that they had already sent her IP address and details to the FBI. In response, the girl named Sarah began to freak out. She said that she was kidding, that she was terrified, and that it wasn't even her that did it. She insisted that it was her friend that made the tweet on her account. It didn't matter. In a few short days, Sarah had her Twitter account suspended and was in custody of the Rotterdam police. Of course, she was just a kid, and they couldn't charge her with anything serious. But the scare was enough to let her and everyone else know one very important thing. Just because you do or say something on the internet doesn't mean you can't get arrested in the real world. Number 4. The prison escape. An inmate managed to escape prison just to spend 2 nights with his wife in a luxury hotel. But when he took to Facebook to brag about what he was doing, he found himself swiftly put back behind bars. 26-year-old Douglas Ward was serving 5 years for a firearms offense. He managed to escape from a prison in Lincolnshire, the UK, and book himself and his wife into a nearby hotel. In an amazing show of stupidity, Douglas made the booking under his own name and used his own credit card details to pay for the room. Yet, this isn't what got him busted. It was the hotel manager who saw Facebook pictures of Douglas and his wife drinking the bottles in the minibar. Beneath the picture was one of the convict's friends asking if he'd gotten out of prison. In response, Douglas said he was just out for the day. Dismayed by what he was seeing online, the manager of the hotel reached out to the police. Arrangements were quickly made for Douglas to be captured and taken back to prison. But this time he was sent to a more secure jail where he has yet been able to break free. Number 3. Flashing the cash. A man was arrested by the FBI after posting insane photographs on social media. These photographs showed the criminal flashing a whole lot of cash. The cash was procured by Orlando Henderson from the very bank he was employed at. You see, Orlando had been systematically stealing cash straight from the bank vault. In total, he managed to get away with about $88,000 in cold hard paper. That's according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Carolina. He may have been able to keep getting away with it too, if he didn't brag about his thefts on social media. He had managed to gather himself quite a few followers by posting pictures of his life of luxury. The only problem was that it didn't really fit in with what his normal paychecks were. According to the criminal indictment, Orlando Henderson stole the $88,000 in small amounts on 18 different occasions. He also committed loan fraud in order to procure himself a luxury automobile. But his luxury lifestyle caught up to him, because between July and August of 2019, he started posting photographs of himself with the actual cash. And that was the final straw that had the FBI go knocking on his door. He's now looking at somewhere between 30 and 40 years in jail for his crimes. Number 2. Destroying America. 2 British tourists were denied entry into the United States of America after they joked on Twitter that they were going to destroy the country and dig up the corpse of Marilyn Monroe. Let me first say that it was supposed to be a joke. Lee Van Bryan was a normal 26-year-old guy who was excited about his vacation to Los Angeles with his friend, Emily Bunting. But when he got to the country, he was put in handcuffs, thrown into a cell, and kept under armed guard. It's because he was flagged by the Department of Homeland Security as a threat to the nation. But something got lost in translation. In the UK, the word destroy is slang for party. When somebody says they're going to destroy the city, it means they're going to party really hard in that particular city. It was in absolutely no way a threat. Nonetheless, the US authorities treated him like a bomb-wielding terrorist. As for the tweet about digging up Marilyn Monroe, that was actually a quote from the American TV show Family Guy. He was definitely not planning on digging up someone's corpse. In the end, both of them were sent back to the UK and have absolutely no interest in ever trying to visit the US again. What do you think? Reasonable reaction from DHS or no? Let me know in the comments. Number 1. Paycheck up in smoke. In Canada, back in 2013, Sunith Bahirathan got fired from his job for trying to buy marijuana on Twitter and have it delivered to his work. If you don't think the police are looking at every single thing you say on social media, this should be a huge wake-up call. The employee sent out a tweet saying that he was looking to buy a joint. The York Regional Police picked it up immediately, and they reached out to his employer. There wasn't much they could do about him trying to purchase a single joint, but they were able to rat him out to his job, which he promptly lost. Not only that, but he also allegedly lost his final paycheck. He was left broke, jobless, and locally smeared as a pot smoker. Of course, this wouldn't have the same effect today, since cannabis and related products have been legal across Canada since 2019. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen someone post on social media that got them in trouble? Let me know in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed it, and come back soon for more wild videos.